folks. Rebecca Adams here. Glad to see you back again. Thank you for joining us. And I have the one and only Becky Vermeer with me tonight.
Hello.
We can barely hear you. I don't understand why it does that.
Oh,
That's even worse.
it is?
Yeah.
Am I not loud enough?
No, I can't
Where'd
hear
my
it.
volume go?
I don't
You can't
know.
hear me at all?
Very, very little. And the closer you got to the mic, the worse it was.
So if I talk into the mic, you can't hear me at all?
I can hear you, but it's not like you're drawing the mic closer to you. That's strange.
Huh. And you've been hearing me fine this whole time?
Up until that last recording where I had a hard time hearing you.
Yeah.
Strange.
Interesting. I don't know what to do. Everything's turned all the way up.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, Becky does her Mrs. Doubtfire imitation, and I love it.
It's my signature salutation.
Yes, it is. It is. So you have socks, I hope, tonight to show us?
I have socks. Do you have earrings?
I do.
Oh, pretty.
$5. Yep, $5. And I mean, where am I going to wear these? Just on a. So it's like, okay, I know what I'm wearing tonight.
That works. So my featured pair of socks for the evening are these. Yep.
Love those colors. What does it say?
It says majestically awkward. I thought that was a very good description of me. There's an interesting bird on this side,
Ooh.
and this side says majestically awkward.
Well, see, I don't see you as awkward at all. I
You don't?
don't. No.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
Well, I think it suits me.
Well, I disagree, but that's okay.
You're allowed to disagree. That's fine.
So, what are we going to talk about tonight, Miss Becky?
I don't know. You tell me. What are we going to talk about tonight?
Folks, I do the editing, the marketing. She's the brains, I'm the brawn. But, sometimes she needs to lean on me for ideas. And I get that. I get that. So I'm curious, what trips your trigger that people say about, domestic violence. And as through the years, you're in year 27 of being the executive director for the shelter there in your area. So you've done a lot of training in the area, and you've said in the past that people are they're beginning to get educated on what abuse is like. So what kind of things do people say that really get your ire up, to show my age? Use a word that's not even used anymore.
There are a few things that do, and it's the same things over and over and over again. Probably much to the chagrin of my staff. Somebody will say something and they're like, "Oh, here it comes." And so there's people that know me well probably know what trips my trigger about domestic violence or the topic of domestic violence. But one of the biggest ones, and unfortunately it's still very prevalent, I think, in the world that we live in today, there is still a lot of victim blaming that goes along in our society. And so maybe the overall fine-tuned definition of victim blaming, people like to take a look at incidents of domestic violence, and I still to this day hear, well, what did you do? There's not the instant response of, and we've said this 1,000 times in recordings that we've done, there's not the instant response of, why does that abuser feel like it's okay to abuse you?
Mm-hmm.
And that should be the response.
Yeah.
But instead we hear, well, what did you do to cause that? Why didn't you do anything to stop that?
Mhm.
Why are you allowing this type of treatment to come in your direction. We hear statements like that all of the time. And why that frustrates me so much is it shows a very clear lack of understanding about the dynamics of domestic violence. And so you and I have talked multiple times in recordings and everything else about domestic violence is motivated, people who are abusers are motivated to maintain power and control over the victims. How many times have we used the example? If you went on a date with somebody for the very first time today, and when your suitor, let's just talk in old language the whole time. When your suitor walks you to the door, instead of leaning in and giving you a kiss, he leans in and punches you in the face. Are you going to go out with that person again?
Mm-mm.
No, absolutely not. And I've never met a person yet who, when I asked that question, said, "Oh yeah, I definitely would." Straight across the board, when I say that example straight across the board, no, I would never go out with that person again. So two things: people are not understanding the power differential that takes place in abusive relationships. People are not understanding that, as crazy as it sounds, the foundation of an abusive relationship is built on love.
Sounds kind of like opposites. Yeah.
It sounds like an oxymoron. And so let's talk about when I say the foundation is built on love, there's a perception that love exists in the relationship.
Yeah.
Here's the deal. If I'm an abuser, and I am motivated to maintain power and control over a victim, I am not going to be overtly aggressive toward that victim when I first meet that person.
Right.
In fact, I'm going to be quite the contrary. I'm going to be pleasant. I'm going to be loving. I'm going to be supportive. I'm going to be interested. I'm going to ask questions and get to know you and be enamored with you and all of those things. Because those kind of touchy-feely, feel-good, endorphin-y kind of things are what falling in love feels like.
Mm-hmm.
So an abuser is going to play that part until the abuser has convinced the victim that this is a loving, committed relationship.
Mm-hmm.
That's when the abuse starts. It doesn't start on day 1. It may not start on day 50. It may not start on day 365. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, though, that abuser is going to begin exercising tactics of power and control against the victim. And so when I hear statements like, you allowed the abuser to treat you like that, it just goes all over me. It just goes all over me. Because I understand that abusive relationships, power and control takes place.
Mm-hmm.
The abuser has done everything the abuser can to take the power away from the victim. It takes away the power of choice, takes away the power of boundaries, takes away the power of no self-esteem, no self-worth, feeling like I can't think for myself, I can't do for myself. This person has complete power over me. And so when someone comes along and says, "Well, you allowed yourself to be treated like that," it instantly makes me angry. Could we possibly blame the victim anymore for the scenario that person finds themselves in?
Yeah.
So what a victim of domestic violence is facing when all of those tactics of power and control that we've talked about in many episodes before, when all of those tactics of power and control are going on, that puts the victim instantly in that place of survival mode.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the situation that a victim faces all day, every day. What's the lesser of two evils? So my abuser verbally assaults me, puts me down, calls me names, destroys my self-worth, attacks me emotionally. I have two choices. I receive it, take it in, or I stand up and fight it. What happens when you're with an abuser, and you stand up and fight?
You're going to get fought back again, and they're usually more powerful, physically stronger than you. So you're going to get possibly bones broken, bruises. Yeah, it's going to be not pretty.
Exactly. So then the verbal attack becomes a physical attack. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
And so when someone says, well, you allowed yourself to be abused. No, you allowed yourself to not be killed.
Mm-hmm.
You were in survival mode. Or when somebody wants to say, well, you put your children in that environment. No, you didn't put your children in that environment. You started a loving, committed relationship with a person who told you they loved you. So what you're guilty of, if you have to be guilty of anything, what you're guilty of is you believe somebody who said they loved you. That's what you're guilty of. But signing on for that relationship and believing the person that says they love you does not mean you're signing on for physical assault, emotional assault, spiritual assault, psychological assault, financial assault, and sexual assault, and all the things that take place. That's not what you signed on for.
Mm-mm.
You signed on for a loving, committed relationship. And the abuser changed. The abuser took what you signed on for and muddled it and muddied it and
Mm-hmm.
profaned it and turned it into a situation where that person felt like they have the right to speak to you whatever way they want to speak to you,
Mm-hmm.
to touch you whatever way they want to touch you, etc., etc.
Yep.
We have a really bad habit in the society that we live in blaming the victim. I can't tell you how many times I've heard the response be, well, what did you do? My boyfriend punched me in the face last night. Well, what did you do? I made dinner.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't that what it looks like in an abusive relationship?
Yeah.
I sat down on the couch and said hello.
Mm-hmm.
He started to scream and yell at me. You didn't do anything. You know, the classic story I told an example many episodes ago about the person laying in bed who gets awakened in the middle of the night from the abuser, who starts then screaming and yelling. Asks the question, what did you do? I went to sleep.
Yeah.
You know, that's the same scenario of somebody who has a car accident. Well, it happened to me. I was sitting in a restaurant eating lunch and somebody hit my car. So the insurance adjuster calls me and says, well, I want to know your side of the story. I'm trying to determine who was guilty. I was sitting in the restaurant eating lunch and my car was parked in a parking lot. So who do you think is guilty? I mean, that's the same kind of scenario. So you're going to blame me and tell
Yeah.
me that I'm at fault? No,
Yep.
because I didn't do anything.
Right.
And that same scenario, the woman sleeping in bed, she didn't do anything. And so,
Mm-mm.
because the reasonable mind tries to make reason out of unreasonable behavior all of the time, those are the questions that we ask. Because
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense if I call you and say, last night, for no apparent reason, my husband hit me in the face. That doesn't make sense.
No.
So then the instant response is going to be, well, what did you do to cause that? So that's my soapbox. You know, my soapbox has always been, when are we going to start asking the question, why does the abuser feel like it's okay to abuse?
Mm-hmm.
If every single time in every single setting that we were in, we asked that question, it would start to make sense. We
Yeah.
would start to facilitate change. People would start to understand you're blaming the wrong person.
Mm-hmm.
Years ago, social services was known for coming into a situation where abuse is taking place and saying to the mother, why aren't you protecting your children? Not asking the question, why does the abuser feel like it's okay to abuse you in front of your children?
Mm-hmm.
That's the question that we should be asking.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of overgeneralizations that take place in that because people don't understand the power differential.
Yeah.
Because most of us, when we get involved in the relationship with another person, we're looking for a partnership.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking for, at a minimum, 50-50,
Mm-hmm.
but in a preferred world, 100-100, where we're both bringing in the best of ourselves and we're working together for a common goal. That's what we're looking for when we enter into a relationship with someone.
Mm-hmm.
That whole, I don't need you, but I want you attitude.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're looking for when we get
Yep.
involved in a relationship. We're not looking for that power differential or the abuse to take place.
Mm-mm.
But we're not abusers.
Right.
The abuser, on the other hand, is looking for just the opposite of that. So then we hear victims of domestic violence getting blamed for, why don't you just learn how to set boundaries? Have you ever tried to set a boundary with someone who's determined to hurt you?
Mm.
Is
Good
that
question.
possible? So, you know, let's think about the scenario where everybody can kind of put themselves in that scenario. Let's think about all the bank heist movies you've ever seen, where the robbers come into the bank, shooting up the bank, and everybody get on the floor and nobody move. Your
Mhm.
choice has instantly been taken away. So you've
Right.
got somebody waving a gun at you.
Mhm.
You stand up and say, "No, now I'm going to set a boundary, and you're not allowed to talk to me like that, and I'm not going to get on the floor."
Right?
It's ludicrous. That's why you're laughing. It's ludicrous when somebody with a gun says you will do this.
Yeah.
So your choice is you comply and you get
Mhm.
on the floor, or you don't and you try to set a boundary and you get shot,
Yeah.
or you get kidnapped, or you get physically injured in some way or another.
Mhm.
That's the type of environment that someone who is a victim of domestic violence, they live in that environment all day, every day.
Yeah.
The only difference is they never know when the bad guy's going to come through the door.
Mm-mm.
Sometimes the good guy comes through the door.
Yep.
And so the car pulls in the driveway and you're prepared for the bad guy, and the bad guy doesn't come. So when the bad guy doesn't come, what do? You let your guard down.
Mhm.
Oh, tonight's going to be a mellow night. There's not going to be anything bad that happens. And then 20 minutes later, there's the bank robbers show up and you're discombobulated and you have no idea what just happened because you didn't do anything different than you would normally do.
Thank you.
But now you're told if you would just set a boundary, that wouldn't happen.
Mhm.
Talk about for a second the relationship that you escaped from. How could setting a boundary have worked for you?
It didn't, because 'cause I'm thinking as you're talking about, him coming through the door and what's he gonna be like. And I've said before, an hour at least before he was due to come home. I mean, I just became more and more and more just tense and scared to death and didn't know what was going to happen. What's it going to be like when he comes through the door? And very rarely was it nice, calm, quiet kind of a thing. I can literally just sitting here talking to you, I can still hear his keys clink on the counter at where he always put his wallet and everything. I
Mhm.
can still hear that. Um, it was a thing of there was no way I could set a boundary.
Right.
There was no way. I mean, with the whole thing with the meals, and we've been over this before too,
Mhm.
he wanted to literally walk in, sit down to dinner, and eat right then. No waiting, and he wanted it a perfect temperature. So
Did he get
what
home at the same time every night?
every single night, it was like clockwork. You could set your
Okay.
clock to it.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely like clockwork. And well, for one thing, I'm not good in the kitchen. For another thing, who can literally fix an entire meal because it had to be he was a steak and potatoes kind of guy. So who can put together an entire meal and have everything ready at the exact same moment, and the kids are all supposed to be sitting around the table even though they would get bored waiting as I'm getting this put on, and everything's the perfect temperature. And I I can remember so many times there'd be steam coming off the plate because it was a hot meal. He wanted a hot meal, right? So then in order to try to put me down in front of the kids, and I didn't know that then. I didn't know what his motive was. He would sit there and make pretend that he's coughing. Goodness, it's so hot. And that made me so mad. I wanted to just pick it up and throw it in his face and watch it drip all over in his lap, but I never did. Um,
Yeah.
but what kind of a boundary can you set there? You can't.
Can't.
You can't set a boundary. You can't say, no, I'm going to have supper ready after you get home. Oh, I couldn't have set that boundary. That would
No.
not have worked. No,
Mhm.
there's no way you can set a boundary.
Right. And so what the general public doesn't think about is the consequence of those choices. Once you find out, because it's usually not overtly apparent,
Right.
it takes time before. How many women have I talked to at the crisis center who's in the classic statement? One morning I woke up in a box. I had
Yeah.
no idea how I got there, and I
Yeah.
had no idea how to get out. It was so subtle and it was so purposeful, and it was so manipulative that I bought it. So I guess that's what I'm saying. If we're gonna, if we feel the need to blame the victim, we're gonna have to blame the victim for believing somebody when they talk to them.
Mhm.
And we all do. We believe people when they talk to us. And when someone says, I love you and I want what's best for you, and so I'm going to do what I can to make sure that happens, that's what marriage is. That's what we look at and say, that's fantastic. Let's get married.
Mhm.
That's the promise that was made, but it's not the promise that was kept.
No.
And so anytime that we take a look at those relationships and we look at the victim and say, you didn't do enough, shame on you is what I want to say.
Mhm.
Shame on you.
Mhm.
Because what the victim in that relationship was trying to do, let's talk about your scenario. You were trying to safely raise 3 children with someone who wasn't willing to partner with you. In
Mm-mm.
fact, it was someone who was willing to hurt you
Mhm.
and would turn on the kids if necessary.
Mhm.
What are you supposed to do in that scenario? Oh,
Yeah.
you should just leave. Sure you should.
Mhm.
How easy is that?
Mm-mm. There's no way. No way. If I had started to walk out the door and said, "Kids, come on." Oh no, it would have been on then. Game on.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And so the people that say, well, you should just walk away are the people that don't understand the power differential, or they're the people
Right.
that have never found themselves in that situation.
Mm-mm.
They've never been involved with someone who's totally motivated to maintain power and control. They've
Right.
never been involved with someone who wants to take your choices away. And there's no other relationship that compares to it
Mm-mm.
other than an intimate partner relationship.
Mhm.
People can talk about work relationships and supervisors and employees. Can there be an element of power and control that takes place there? Yes.
Oh yeah.
Can you work for a boss who is an abusive boss? Yes. Do you still maintain the choice to quit the job and go somewhere else?
Mhm.
Yes,
Mhm.
because you're not in an intimate partner relationship with your boss. You shouldn't be.
Right, right. You better not be, yeah.
I think that's unethical. I think that's what they say.
I think so.
So, I mean, there's a different relationship there. I mean,
Totally. Yeah.
students in classrooms say that teachers are abusive to them. Is that
Mhm.
possible that that can happen? Yes.
Mhm.
Is there a perceived power that the teacher has over the student? Yes.
Mhm.
Can the students not go to that class? Yes.
Mhm.
I mean, there may be things that you have to do in order to make that happen, but you can still take care of yourself even in a situation like that.
Mhm.
That's why domestic violence is unlike any other crime that happens,
Right.
because you free will entered into a relationship and find yourself stuck. And when you
Exactly.
factor in financial abuse, or you factor in children in the relationship and all the
Mhm.
things that go along with that,
Yeah.
you can't just turn around and walk away.
No.
I mean,
And
you can try, but you know how many times victims of domestic violence try to walk away from an abuser and as a result get killed?
right. Yep. Exactly. Let me put it in perspective for you. When we're talking about just walking away,
Mhm,
which I love how we say escape because that's
mhm,
really what it boils down to. So I'm going to
absolutely.
put it in perspective. So when either he or I would get sick, then I would go out and sleep on the couch because if I was sick, I didn't want to give it to him. And if he was sick, I definitely didn't want to catch it. I catch things very easily. So I didn't want to get sick. I had to stay healthy to try to run the house.
Mhm,
I was terrified, and I'm not exaggerating. I was terrified at the thought of going out there and sleeping on the couch because I knew what was going to happen. And it happened every time. I was terrified to even stay up 10 minutes past the time I knew I was supposed to be in bed with him because I knew what was going to happen. And it happened every time. He would come out and give me his little speech, and I had his little speech memorized. And it was a woman is supposed to be in bed with her husband when he's in bed. She's not supposed to come to bed later than he is. And inside I would play this game where I would just say it ahead of time. And then when he would come to that phrase, I'd be, you know,
Yeah,
doing the nose laugh. I really wasn't on the outside, but
sure,
that just kind of puts it in perspective. So we're talking
sure.
minor little things
Mhm.
that any other household that has a healthy relationship would go, "You were terrified because what?" I never knew
Exactly.
what he was going to do. So the last thing that I'm going to think about doing is escaping because
Mhm.
it sounds impossible. If I can't
Exactly.
even stay up and get myself 10 extra minutes of peace of mind to try to gather my thoughts before I have to go in there and sleep next to him. If I can't do that, then why would I think I could escape?
Exactly. Or why would you think that you could say no?
Exactly.
Because had you insisted on staying on the couch, let's say one night you decided, I'm sleeping on the couch, I'm ignoring your speech, what would have happened?
It was not pretty.
Mhm,
It happened many, many times.
mhm,
And there was one time, it was right towards the end. I had the flu. I got the flu so bad. I'd never been that sick before. And there were 3 nights that I slept on the couch. That 3rd night he came out and he sat on the coffee table right next to me and he started in on his speech. And it had an extra power punch to the
mhm.
way he said it. And I knew that I don't even know, it was so threatening and it was so strong the way he talked. Well, that was the night that my youngest son overheard what he said and how he talked to me. And he had the bathroom door just barely cracked, and his dad didn't notice it when he walked by the bathroom. And as soon as his dad went back in there and went to bed, he immediately came to my side and he said, "Mom, I heard how he talked to you." And he said, "I had goosebumps standing all over the place on my arms." He said, "I want you to know I am never going to let him talk to you like that again." And I was just blown away. I finally had somebody who could create a boundary and help enforce a boundary. And it wasn't all
Yeah,
up to me.
yeah.
But let me tell you, he was, my ex was getting warmed up to, it was going to be, yeah, it was going to get worse
Mhm.
because I set up a boundary and said, "I'm going to keep you from getting sick. So I'm sleeping on the couch."
Right. How dare you be
So,
concerned about his physical health?
yeah, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
terrible thing. Yeah.
Mhm. And so when people say that you allow that or you partner with you partnered with your abuser as one that really goes all over me. No, you didn't. You're in survival mode. And
Hmm.
so unfortunately when you're in survival mode, sometimes it's safer to go along with something that you're requested to go
Hmm.
along with than it is to say no. And so people in survival mode don't have the freedom to make choices logically. And
Right.
I'm not saying they're illogical people or I'm not saying they're not intelligent people, but when you're in that fight or flight of what do I do now? There's fight, flight, or freeze.
Hmm.
And this person being overly threatening to you on that day, you freeze.
Hmm.
You can't leave, you know that. You can't fight, you know that, and so you freeze, and then your son hears that, and now your son's in that same place of survival mode.
Hmm.
So then there are outsiders looking in that would say, "Well, why did you put your son in that position?"
Yeah.
You didn't.
No.
You didn't.
Nope.
Your abuser did.
Hmm.
And so why aren't we highlighting that?
Hmm.
But still, 2023, in
Yeah.
the state of Missouri, it's been against the law to abuse your spouse since 1980. Was that 43 years ago?
Hmm.
43 years later, we still have people that will say, stop partnering with your abuser. Why are you allowing him to talk to you like that? Why are you allowing him to treat you like that?
Hmm.
And what we know is escape is the right word, and escape is not easy.
No,
when there
it's
are
not.
all those tactics of power and control hanging over you that
Mhm,
are in full effect all day, every day.
mhm.
I mean, it's victim blaming at its finest. I have a sign in my office that says, "Stop blaming the victim." Simple. Stop blaming the victim. That's all it says.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
it's a powerful statement. Stop blaming the
Mhm.
victim.
Mhm.
And I
'Cause
think, I don't know if you and I have talked about it before, there was a video that was going around on Facebook or YouTube about police officers coming to a home to investigate a crime. And the police officers were talking to the victim of the robbery the same way that occasionally police officers talk to victims of domestic violence. It was a stolen computer. Well, why did you leave the stolen computer out? Why did you leave the computer on the table? If you'd have put the computer in the closet, maybe the computer would have gotten the silliness. And it highlights. I need to see if we can find that, and should post a link on our channel. I need to see if I
Mhm,
can find that, because the silliness of the whole thing, it's
mhm,
so profound,
mhm,
because it perfectly highlights the
mhm,
way that as a community we still talk to victims of domestic violence.
mhm.
So then what's really happening is the victim is not partnering in the abuse with the
No.
abuser. The community at large is partnering with the abuser.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
people aren't willing to take ownership of their own behaviors in that situation. So when you say to someone who said, "I got physically assaulted by my husband last night," when you say, "What did you do?" You've instantly partnered with the abuser. Instantly.
Yep.
And now you're not even a safe person for the victim to talk to.
No, they're not gonna go back to you and talk to you.
You're not emotionally safe. And
Mm-mm.
so, the detriment of the message that that person is feeding you was, "It's your fault and you should do something about it."
Mhm.
Now you're not an emotionally safe person for me to talk about the stuff that I'm
Exactly.
dealing with right now,
Mhm.
because you don't get it. So what
Right.
do? You stop talking.
Mhm.
So then it falls all the way back to the full circle of what's one of the tactics abusers use? Let's isolate you from your network of support. That's
Yes.
exactly what just happened.
Mhm.
And so your network of support fell prey to the
Mhm.
abuser
Yeah.
and kind of dumped you in the process.
And I will be honest with you, that mindset of victim blaming is what I got every time we went to biblical counseling.
Mhm. I'm
It that
sure.
this is my experience. I'm not saying this is the way it's gonna be for everybody, but that's what I got every time I went to biblical counseling, was that it's, well, you've got to do what he wants you to do. You can't do, you know, in other words, when you read between the lines, you can't do the right thing. You have
Right.
to do what he wants, whether that's
Submit to
right or
his
not.
authority. There's that
Yes,
submit,
yes.
submit,
Mhm,
submit, submit all of the time.
exactly.
And my rebuttal to that over the years has always been the same. Every single woman on the planet would joyfully submit to their husband if their husband followed through with the verse that says, "Love your wives the way that Christ loves his church." If that was the husband that you were with, you joyfully submit,
Mhm,
because you would understand that his everything that he says and does is to love you and support you and encourage you and to be available to you and to
mhm.
extend grace and to extend mercy and all the things that Jesus does for his followers.
Yeah.
But that's not what you get in an abusive relationship.
No, it isn't. And I saw the most beautiful relationship yesterday. I went to see a friend and met her husband for the first time. They've been married for 31 years. He snatched her away from an abusive home where she grew up. And
Mhm.
it was horrible. It was absolutely horrendous. And I don't, feel free to share her story, but she literally almost died at one point. And he finally said, they were dating at the time, and he finally said, "That's it." So they went off and got married. And I mean, they were kids, but he was the adult in that relationship.
Huh.
And oh my goodness, he is just a wonderful man. She couldn't have gotten anybody better. He's gentle, he's kind, he's caring. He literally is trying to teach her to speak up for herself. Well, what are you wanting for supper tonight? Where would you like to go? Or what would you like for me to fix for you? You know, that kind of stuff is just mind blowing to me. It really
Yeah,
is. But just to see
yeah.
them interact, and you could just feel the love between the two of them was so precious. When he would walk in the room to talk, she was all eyes on him. You know, same with him. When she
Mhm.
talked, he would just, watch her and totally listen to what she's saying.
Yeah.
Totally different than what I had.
Well, I mean, that's the thing is when people enter into a relationship, that's what they think they're entering into.
Yeah.
And that's the promise that the abuser has made, that that's the relationship that you're entering into.
Hmm.
But that's not a promise that they can follow through on.
No. And the reason is I wish I had a mask here. But you know the two masks that are always used for theater, anybody
Uh-huh.
that's
Uh-huh.
acting or anything.
Yeah.
Okay, when you first meet that abuser and they are sweet and charming and funny and whatever else, and they seem to care about you and everything, then they have a mask up. And
Mhm.
for me, anyway, my change that I saw in my ex was the morning after our wedding night. And he woke up and that mask was gone. It was
Mhm.
destroyed. I don't know where it went, but it disappeared and I never saw that mask again.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
you're caught off guard. You're like, well,
Yeah.
how did this happen?
It's a
Well, that
perfect analogy
yeah.
because I mean, an abuser is going to do what an abuser is going to do until they get you. And for some people, the get you doesn't happen until the wedding day. You know,
Mhm.
I tell the story about the person that I know that they never saw the abuse happening until the wedding night, and he hit her on the wedding night,
Yeah.
and that was a 12-year abusive relationship. Didn't see it coming, and so I mean that's the thing is how do you set boundaries when you're so blindsided?
Mhm.
Most people, if that's the first instance where something like that ever happens, you get hit and you're like, you don't even know how to process it. What just happened?
Mhm.
How did that just happen? Wait, what do I do? Like there's all of those questions going on. And so the last thing on your mind is, well, I need to set a boundary and say you can't do that.
Mhm. How was that lady
And
supposed to set a boundary?
exactly, exactly. If you never saw
Mhm.
it coming. And the
Right.
thing is if that's the very first time you've ever been hit and you try to set that boundary, well, he just hit me. Is he gonna hit me again?
Mhm.
Probably.
Yeah.
So do you want to be hit again? Oh, definitely not.
No.
And people don't understand that.
I
So
love
there's
the
this overgeneralized it's easy and you should be able to do it. But it's easy and you should be able to do it when you're in a non-abusive relationship. Again, when you're two partners coming together in a partnership, it's
Mhm.
easy.
Yep.
When you're not two partners coming together in a partnership, it's impossible. And so we overgeneralize what we think relationships should be. And so we feel like the victim's partnering with the abuser in that, and that's couldn't be any more far from the truth than it is.
Exactly. I love the example that I've heard you give, and it's so ludicrous that it always sets me to laughing. But somebody gets robbed on the street, broad daylight.
Mhm.
You don't go up to that person and say, "Well, what did you do to make them
Exactly.
rob you?" I mean, it's no different, and I just
Exactly.
love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So that's a big one for me. Another one that kind of goes all over me
Well,
is when
actually,
people
we've finished an episode. You want to hang on to that for the next episode? Your thought on that next topic?
sure,
Can you believe we've already done one episode already?
look at us go. Oh, we really have, haven't we?
Yeah, we really have.
Well, there you go.
I love it. I love it
So we
when you
talked
get on.
about victim blaming.
Well, I love it when you get on your soapbox because you give us so much information and you explain it, you lay it out so well for us to
Thank you.
really, really be able to grasp it and say, yeah, we should be asking how come you think it's right for you to hit her or whatever that abuse may be. Well, let's go ahead and wrap this one up.
Okay.
So you have a hand signal to teach us?
I do.
Yes. What is the international hand signal?
Sorry, I'm being silly.
You're fine. You crack me up. I never know what you're gonna do. So what
There
is
is an
the
international hand signal for
yes.
people who are in distress and they're looking for assistance getting set free, so to speak, getting help getting away from an abuser.
Mhm.
And so it's pretty simple. You put your hand up like this, you put your thumb inside your hand, and you fold your four fingers over the top. And so if you see somebody doing this, that means that they're trying to get away from the person that they're with, or they need help trying to escape, etc.
Mhm.
So hopefully the person on the street that sees that would be willing to intervene. If that person's not willing to intervene, call the police, something,
Mhm.
reach out and try to help that person.
Right. Because I did see somebody, excuse me, I was a pedestrian on the street and I did see a man, he was beginning to beat up his girlfriend or wife, whoever she was, and it paralyzed me. I didn't know what I should do. I didn't feel safe calling 911 from where I was and being on the phone while this all went down because it wasn't long and they both came walking right by me. And so I'm like, glad I wasn't on the phone, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, the next person maybe, or right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But yes, you could definitely something that she needed help.
Definitely.
Yeah. So
Yeah. And so
folks,
the more people that learn that hand signal or learn what that hand signal means, the greater strides that we'll be taking to providing assistance to somebody in need.
absolutely. Absolutely. And hopefully we won't need it at some point, like kidnapping or anything like that. But it just, we need to know it. We need to be
Yes,
aware of what that is.
definitely.
Yeah. So, folks, no matter where you are in the process, it doesn't matter because the bottom line is you are free to soar.